Again, for those who are just tuning in right now, we are less than 30 minutes out from President Biden giving his Oval Office address. This is, of course, in the immediate aftermath of, I guess, what was an assassination attempt against Donald Trump in his Pennsylvania rally. So I haven't said anything about it. Full disclosure, I thought I might give myself a couple of days yesterday and today off, and so I left my house, and obviously news blew up yesterday. So that little vacation was cut short, and so I haven't said anything about it. I'm gonna be releasing a video shortly where I'll kind of give all of my thoughts on everything that happened, but I think it would be irresponsible not to say first and foremost that I'm pretty sickened by everything that's happened. I'm pretty sickened by the political environment that we live in right now. This isn't why I got into this, to cover stuff like this, to feel like politics is dangerous, to feel like, parts of my own life are dangerous, to feel like anybody should feel intimidated to be able to participate in the political process. This isn't what we should, this isn't how it should be. With that said, I think a big part of why and I know so many of you are fighting so hard to make sure that Donald Trump doesn't win in November is expressly so as not to validate violence as an effective political tool. And of course, Trump himself has a long history of endorsing violence as a political tool, whether it's, early days, him promising to pay the legal bills of his supporters who beat up protesters at his rallies, to, the entire MAGA movement basically making fun of Paul Pelosi when he was attacked with a hammer, to the events of January 6th themselves, and inciting an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol as a way to pressure lawmakers, Mike Pence, to anoint the loser of the election the winner. That is why we fight so hard to make sure that the people who wield violence as a political tool don't get further power, because they'll only be further emboldened by the fact that it works. With that said, I know that a big topic on everybody's minds right now is, aside from the safety implications of all of this, is of course the electoral and political implications of all of this. I do want to say that, I had some people come to me on Twitter because I tweeted like one thing yesterday, and it was just kind of noting how gross J.D. Vance's immediate gut reaction to all of this was, which J.D. Vance came on the Twitter and said, "This is not some isolated incident. The central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric led directly to President Trump's attempted assassination." First of all, he doesn't know that, and apparently the shooter was identified as a registered Republican. So not only is it fucking disgusting for J.D. Vance to come out and say that immediately, solely because he has his finger very much on the pulse of the MAGA movement and feeds into just the extremism that is percolating within that base. But I tweeted that I thought it was disgusting, and it was, and it is. And then a few people wrote to me and they're like, well, you've called him a fascist, and Donald Trump is a fascist, and this doesn't change any of that. And I think it's so bizarre for there to have been created out of whole cloth by J.D. Vance, for him to have anointed himself the person who's made himself the arbiter of why this now dead shooter tried to shoot Donald Trump, by reverse engineering some reason that would immediately pin the blame on all of Democrats, which is already insane. But then for doing something that Donald Trump himself is doing, he is a fascist. He does want to be a dictator. Using that rhetoric is just acknowledging objective reality. He himself has said that he wants to terminate the Constitution. He himself has said that he would be a dictator on day one. He himself has put forward, this, whether it's Agenda 47 or Project 2025, they all lead to the same thing, which is basically an all-powerful executive branch where Donald Trump would be able to seek revenge on all of his political enemies and get retribution against people who he thinks wronged him. This is fascist behavior, and us acknowledging the objective reality that Donald Trump is a fascist and wants to embrace a fascist form of government for himself doesn't mean that some lunatic who chose violence at the hands of a gun, which, by the way, we'll get to in a moment, but who decided to be violent at the hands of a gun, doesn't mean that all of that is wrong, or that we're wrong for acknowledging that objective reality, or that we should feel any kind of way other than right in acknowledging what Donald Trump is trying to do. So I want to put that out there, like, first and foremost, because I thought that was an insane reaction by people. And I didn't tweet or anything other than that. I didn't go live other than that because, it's, I think it does help to take a minute and just kind of take a beat before you just rush to say anything in a situation like this, especially when tensions are so hot. On the gun thing, I mean, this is somebody who had a gun, who Democrats have advocated for not to have a gun because he was 20 years old. He was using a gun that Democrats have sought to outlaw because we don't think civilians should have access to them because they are weapons of war. If anything, if Republicans had passed or listened to or supported the policies that Democrats have espoused with regard to any of these gun safety measures, the likelihood is that this wouldn't have happened. And I mean, this shouldn't be the inciting incident for anybody to change their minds. I mean, we've had God knows how many shootings over the last 10 years, 15 years in this country. All of those should have been the last straw. But I think we shouldn't forget the fact that we are advocating for an agenda that would make it exponentially more difficult, if not impossible, for people to get their hands on exactly the kind of weapon that allowed some lunatic from 150 yards away to try and assassinate a political official. So there is that aspect of this as well. With that said, look, if you guys have questions, by the way, throw them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer. For those just joining right now, we have about 20 minutes until President Biden addresses the country from the Oval Office. He's only done so twice before. I believe once was after the infrastructure law was passed, and I believe once was for a speech related to Israel, Gaza. So this will be the third time that he addresses the nation from the Oval Office. So I think the point here is to convey the gravity of this speech. I don't know what this speech is going to be about. I don't know if he's going to. I highly, highly doubt he's going to say anything that has to do with his own, with the electoral implications of his own race. I think he's going to focus solely on what happened in Pennsylvania and try to use the opportunity to kind of cool the temperature here. Okay, I'm going to start answering some questions because, I'll have my opportunity in my next video to give the full breadth of my thoughts on all of this. But, we have the opportunity now with this live where I can read your comments and answer some questions that you might have directly. So let's take advantage of that. If you have questions, just tag my name so that I can see it lights up in orange in the chat. If you want to participate in the chat, all you have to do is subscribe. The chat is always subscribers only, so just hit the subscribe button. I'll be able to. Okay, what's my analysis for November? So, look, I don't know. And anybody who tells you how this is going to impact the race in November is lying, because there is no precedent for any of this. We can point to things that happened in 68. We can point to things that happened in the 40s. There is no precedent for any of this. There's no indication of how how this will change. Here's one thing that I can say with some degree of certainty, I'm trying to be measured about what I claim I know for certain, because I don't know any more than anybody else. But I feel like I can say with some degree of certainty that the enthusiasm gap will widen as the result of this. And so Donald Trump's diehard supporters will see this, and it will validate all of their worst fears about what the deep state and the Biden administration, on and on, have done. Is any of that, all of which is completely baseless, is what I'm trying to say. But it'll validate these baseless, misguided beliefs that they have. So they will be certain to be enthusiastic to turn out and vote. Right now, the Democrats' biggest obstacle is the fact that the Democratic base, our coalition, I should say, which isn't just the Democratic base, it's also independents, it's pro-democracy Republicans, it's low information voters, it's low likelihood voters, have an enthusiasm problem right now because of Joe Biden's poor debate performance, of the fact that, in my opinion, we have a Supreme Court who has handed Donald Trump the gift of presidential immunity. And so everything in the last couple of weeks, months, has broken Trump's way. And people see that and they check out and they despair. And that's why a lot of the work that I do, especially when I'm speaking with Mark Elias in our show Democracy Watch, is basically to remind people not to reward the people who are seeking to make you despair by checking out, by throwing your hands up, by not participating in the same process, and basically giving them a win by not showing up, and rewarding them for sabotaging your democracy. So that's why we push so hard against that. But sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But in any case, there is the enthusiasm gap, and I do think that this will exacerbate that gap. And I think it's incumbent on everybody not to check out because things look dire. And they look dire after the Supreme Court ruling. They look dire after the debate. They look even more dire here because we see such an energized right. But that's our job. That's my job, to keep everybody, I as a messenger for a platform, for an agenda that I want to see passed in the next term. It's my job to make sure that everybody has some degree of hope, and it may take us a day or so to get there. But it's everybody else's job not to check out just because things look bad, because that is rewarding the very people who are making things look bad in the first place. So that's my message to everybody here is that, even at the worst moments, and electorally speaking, politically speaking, I don't think it gets much worse than the moment that we're in right now. After the Supreme Court, after the debate, after middling performances by Joe Biden, after the fact that we don't, we have half the party split. I mean, I've done live streams where I've done polling. 20,000 people have voted in terms of whether they want to see Biden stay the nominee or whether they want to see Biden step back as the nominee. And, I've seen 60-40 splits in these polls. That is not a united Democratic Party. So my message in all of this is to not check out. No matter what you do, don't check out. Do not reward the people who are seeking to hurt you the most. So, okay, I'm going to answer some more questions here. Well, there's actually not that many questions. I have gotten the question that the volume is low. Can I turn the volume up? How did the Reagan attempted shooting work in his favor back when he was running? Look, I think we can draw historical equivalencies, and there is something of a, this goes to the last question, there is something of a rally around the flag effect, an enthusiasm effect that it will have, that it had then, that it will almost certainly have now among Trump and his supporters. But, okay, let's see. Hang on real quick. I'm going to go full on this. For those who are joining right now, I'll get back to the question in just a moment. We have about 15 minutes until President Biden addresses the nation from the Oval Office. This is the third time during his presidency that he's addressed the nation from the Oval Office. Okay. So again, this goes to my previous question. Yes, this will have implications in terms of enthusiasm, and the onus is going to be on the left if they want to do everything that they can to ensure that Donald Trump doesn't take power again, to overcome that enthusiasm gap and to recognize that Joe Biden may not be the candidate that you want. Joe Biden, you may not think he should be running. You may not like him. You may be upset with how he presided over, the issue of inflation, over Israel and Gaza, whatever it may be, to recognize, first and foremost, that it will be worse under Donald Trump. And second is that this vote that you cast in this election is not a way to punish Joe Biden. Joe Biden is 81 years old. He's not going to be around forever. He's not going to be around for much longer relative to most people watching right now. And this is not, Joe Biden's going to be fine. He is a powerful, wealthy white politician. He'll be okay. This election is about what kind of a country you want to live in moving forward, and the implications that a Supreme Court that is 6-3 or 7-2, entrenched with, replacements for Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito and maybe Sonia Sotomayor and maybe John Roberts, who may all be appointed by Donald Trump, what that would bring in the country moving forward, whether it's, whether it has to do with abortion, contraception, IVF, fair maps, same-sex marriage, whatever the issue may be. So that I think is an especially important thing to remember as we look toward this election, that this is not about the candidates necessarily at the top of the ticket so much as it's about the kind of country we want to live in moving forward. Is there any way Biden could use this for event, since Trump is already capitalizing on it and photos of him? So I think the question is there any way that Biden could exploit the events that happened in Pennsylvania? No. I mean, he's just not going to. Biden is gonna, they've paused all they've paused all campaign events, all campaign messaging right now. So Biden isn't going to do anything. He's going to just seek to lower the temperature. That is who Biden is inherently. That's who he's always been. His message has been unity from the beginning. And so I think far and away, the message here by President Biden is going to be just allowing cooler heads to prevail, lowering the temperature. I know that he had a phone call with Donald Trump this afternoon. That is going to be his priority moving forward. So no, there won't be any exploiting of what just happened, even though I should note that Donald Trump has already sent fundraising out using the shooting to help himself raise some money. So that is about as unsurprising as any of this could possibly get. If I had asked 100 people here yesterday who thinks that Donald Trump is going to use an assassination attempt to raise money for himself, 100 would have raised their hands. Here's what I'll say. I see a lot of questions here about, like, from people saying, like, look, I'm going to vote for Biden anyway, but I feel like we're screwed, basically. I don't think that the events that took place yesterday are going to necessarily move independent voters into, like, undecided voters into Trump's camp. I think if you were undecided up to this point, someone shooting at him isn't necessarily going to guide someone's vote one way or the other. With that said, I have to make the caveat, I don't know. This is all unprecedented, so I'm not sure. But I think, in terms of the messaging that's going to impact these undecided voters, I think we still absolutely have the opportunity to make our case to people, and that is by continuing to push Project 2025, continuing to talk about what country we'll live in with regard to abortion and contraception and IVF. We can still make that case to people, and I really don't believe, and again, I don't know. I don't know how many people this could have pushed in Trump's corner, but I do have to believe that, if someone was undecided up to now, that they can still be decided based on more legitimate events than an assassination attempt in terms of how this election will actually impact their lives. MAGA is not going to let the temperature cool over this. I agree with that. That was one message that I just got. MAGA is not going to let the temperature cool over this. That's right. And I do think that they have a vested interest. Look, Trump is a demagogue, and demagogues do especially well in an environment where they can exploit people's fear and anger, and that is where Donald Trump is comfortable. That's where he's always been comfortable. He is the foil to the Barack Obama campaign of hope and change. Donald Trump and the MAGA movement are steeped in demagoguery. That is why every year around October, we see migrant caravans, because they want to exploit this insane notion that brown people are coming to rape your wives and sell drugs to your kids. It's always been a campaign built on demagoguery. This further reinforces this MAGA notion that that the deep state is out to get Donald Trump and he's standing in the way, and if it's not him, it's going to be you. So again, all of this lends itself to these already existing narratives that exist within the right-wing media ecosystem and that are pushed by Trump's campaign and his mouthpieces and right-wing media and conspiracy theorists. And our job is to make sure that, that we keep pushing our message, that we don't allow there to be a vacuum where all of this disinformation becomes the main narrative. And so we have to continue pushing the fact that, look, what kind of a country we're going to live in moving forward if Project 2025 is enacted, what kind of a country we're going to live in moving forward if a president does have presidential immunity, and to not let up on that, because I do think to this exact point, this whole narrative is going to lend itself to exactly the story that Trump's been priming or grooming his supporters to know. Opinion on the shooter's motive? I don't know. I have no idea. Again, the shooter apparently, according to reporting, is a registered Republican. Look, I think anybody who's going to get on a roof and try to murder someone, it's not going to be especially easy to ascribe any specific motivations other than the fact that they are clearly mentally ill. And, this is a registered Republican who decided to try and murder somebody in cold blood. So it's not going to be as easy as just describing some simple motivation or like, oh, we want Joe Biden to win, so I'll just do this. It's not someone who's okay. Is there any talk about Michelle Obama running instead of Joe Biden? I mean, no, not any serious talk about it. Look, I think with regard to the Joe Biden of it all, I think that if I had to give my best guess as to what's happening, and this is not to say whether I agree or disagree with any of this, this is just to give you an indication of what I think is going to happen. If I had to put money on predicting what's going to happen in this election, I would say that Joe Biden doesn't look like someone who right now is trying to get out of this race. The polling, well, I guess it depends on what kind of polling you're looking at. There has been some especially devastating polling, and the polling I'm specifically referring to is, I believe it was within the last week, where, for example, Tammy Baldwin was up 5 points and Joe Biden's down 5 points. So these are the same voters who say we are going to vote for Tammy Baldwin, and 10% of them are defecting to Donald Trump. So that is obviously cause for concern. With that said, there have been plenty of polls that show him down 2 percentage points. Is that enough to win? No, it's not. Can you make it back? Yes. Could he? Considering the reason that a lot of people are moving away from Joe Biden is because they have concerns about his age, and given the fact that he's not going to get any younger, I don't know. I'm just trying to give a very objective read on what's happening. So at this point, I don't know. But what I do know is that we will have a resolution within the coming, week or so, just because we're going to get to the point where at the DNC, we'll have a nominee. And right now, he's not officially the nominee. He has delegates pledged to him. I presume that his team is looking at polling. It seems, based on the posture of what a lot of people are doing from the White House, it again doesn't look like anybody is in favor, at least among his inner circle, at least among the Biden folks, in favor of swapping him out for Kamala Harris, for example. So that's just the read I'm getting from all of this. But again, my guess is as good as anybody else's in here. Okay, let me go to some other questions. By the way, for those just joining right now, if you have questions that you want to ask, throw them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them. What do I think is the reason for why Trump has been so quiet since this happened? I think that Trump is running. Look, I think Trump is running a very disciplined campaign right now, and for a very long time. The last few weeks, in the immediate aftermath of the debate, I think Trump very rightly saw Democrats, a lot of confusion, pandemonium among the Democratic Party, and so Trump rightly recognized that, when the left is digging themselves into a hole, don't chime in, don't butt in, and just let them keep digging. It's a disciplined approach to all of this, and it's what Democrats would do when Republicans are, in a moment of complete pandemonium and confusion. So he's just running a disciplined campaign right now. That's all it is. In terms of why he's been quiet since this specific thing happened, look, I think he certain things he wants to say that he's probably now not allowed to say because his campaign, again, is running a disciplined race, and he knows that his mouthpieces can say a lot of those things, and he's probably reveling in the perceived martyrdom of it all, and so he's just like, let him. It's a show. He's like, let him build up the anticipation for when I finally come out as what my base perceives me as being some major savior in all of this. So, he's just making disciplined moves. That's all, in terms of why he's keeping a low profile. But I do want to be clear that he is anything. He would preside in a way that is anything but disciplined. And we've gotten lots of indications of what that would look like with Project 2025, and with the agenda that he's come out himself and advocated for. I apologize, by the way, if I can't get to everybody's questions. I am doing my best here to answer them. Do I think a civil war is inevitable now? No, I don't think a civil war is inevitable. I think it's incumbent upon people with some sense and some desire for calm to come out and not do what J.D. Vance did, which, I read earlier, but I'll read it again now, which is to tweet and say that the central premise of the Biden campaign is that President Donald Trump is an authoritarian fascist who must be stopped at all costs. That rhetoric directly led to President Trump's assassination attempt. That kind of rhetoric. Or Mike Collins from Georgia, who said Joe Biden sent the orders. That's the kind of stuff that I think would lend itself to, further violence. And I think those people should be condemned in all of this. Is there an incentive structure for those people not to do that? Not really. Those J.D. Vance, probably better than anybody else. There's a reason why he's probably the top contender for Trump's VP pick, is because he has his finger on the pulse of what Trump's MAGA base wants. And it's not to lower the temperature. It's never been to lower the temperature. Trump wasn't able to incite an insurrection on January 6th because these people wanted calm. Trump was able to incite an insurrection on January 6th because he recognized a thirst, an insatiable desire by these people to commit violence and to wield it as a political tool, thinking that it could be more potent when the first plan didn't go as he had hoped it would go, which is just for people to show up and vote. When he couldn't do that, he recognized, okay, well, that didn't work out for me. So what else do I have in my toolbox? And, violence has long been kind of a cudgel that Trump and Republicans have sought to wield against Democrats. Again, I had mentioned this earlier, but from the early days of Trump's campaign, his winning campaign in 2016, when he told his supporters that he would pay their legal bills of the people who beat up counter-protesters or protesters in Trump's rally. These are the same people who kind of laughed it off when Paul Pelosi was attacked with a hammer. These are the same people who showed up at the Ellipse on January 6th to storm the Capitol, seeking to assassinate not just politicians, but their own vice president because he wouldn't do Trump's bidding. He has long regarded the use of violence as a tool in his toolbox. And so I think that this is no different. It's incumbent upon the rest of us to not only make sure that we say what we need to say so that we don't ramp up those tensions, but also to make sure that Trump doesn't win, because if he does, then that will just embolden him to continue using violence as a political tool, because that is one of his main weapons right now. And if he wins, he'll just view that as having worked. And so he'll continue to deploy it. He'll continue to make good on his promises to send the military into blue cities and blue states. I mean, this election is precisely about whether it's not just about Biden, Trump. It's not just about the agendas that both of these guys want to enact moving forward, but it's also about the legitimacy of just violence as a tool in politics at all. And if Trump wins, these are the same people. This is somebody who's predicated a lot of his reelection on calling the January 6th insurrectionists
fellow Americans,
heroes.
I want to speak to you tonight about the need for us to lower the temperature in our politics.
There
and
you
to
go.
remember, while we may disagree, we are not enemies. We're neighbors, we're friends, co-workers, citizens, and most importantly, we're fellow Americans. We must stand together. Yesterday's shooting at Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania calls on all of us to take a step back, take stock of where we are, how we go forward from here. Thankfully, former Trump is not seriously injured. I spoke with him last night. I'm grateful. He's doing well, and Jill and I keep him and his family in our prayers. We also extend our deepest condolences to the family of the victims who was killed. Corey was a husband, a father, a volunteer firefighter, a hero, sheltering his family from those bullets. We should all hold his family and all those injured in our prayers. Earlier today, I spoke about an ongoing investigation. We do not know the motive of the shooter yet. We don't know his opinions or affiliations. We don't know whether he had help or support, or if he communicated with anyone else. Law enforcement professionals, as I speak, are investigating those questions. Tonight, I want to speak to what we do know. A former president was shot, an American citizen killed, while simply exercising his freedom to support the candidate of his choosing. We cannot, we must not go down this road in America. We've traveled it before throughout our history. Violence has never been the answer. Whether it's with members of Congress of both parties being targeted and shot, or a violent mob attacking the Capitol on January 6th, or a brutal attack on the spouse of former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, or information and intimidation on election officials, or the kidnapping plot against the sitting governor, or an attempted assassination on Donald Trump. There is no place in America for this kind of violence, or for any violence ever. Period. No exceptions. We can't allow this violence to be normalized. The political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that. Yes, we have deeply felt strong disagreements. The stakes in this election are enormously high. I've said it many times that the choice in this election we make in this election is going to shape the future of America and the world for decades to come. I believe that with all my soul. I know that millions of my fellow Americans believe it as well. And some have a different view as to the direction our country should take. Disagreement is inevitable in American democracy. It's part of human nature. But politics must never be a literal battlefield, and God forbid, a killing field. I believe politics ought to be an arena for peaceful debate, to pursue justice, to make decisions guided by the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. We stand for an America, not of extremism and fury, but of decency and grace. All of us now face a time of testing as the election approaches. And the higher the stakes, the more fervent the passions become. This places an added burden on each of us to ensure that no matter how strong our convictions, we must never descend into violence. The Republican convention will start tomorrow. I have no doubt they'll criticize my record and offer their own vision for this country. I'll be traveling this week making the case for our record and the vision, my vision of the country, our vision. I'll continue to speak out strongly for our democracy, stand up for our Constitution and the rule of law, to call for action at the ballot box, no violence on our streets. That's how democracy should work. We debate and disagree. We compare and contrast the character of the candidates, the records, the issues, the agenda, the vision for America. But in America, we resolve our differences at the battle box. You know, that's how we do it, at the battle box, not with bullets. The power to change America should always rest in the hands of the people, not in the hands of a would-be assassin. You know, the path forward through competing visions of the campaign should always be resolved peacefully, not through acts of violence. You know, we're blessed to live in the greatest country on earth, and I believe that with every soul, every power of my being. So tonight, I'm asking every American to recommit, to make America, think about it. What's made America so special? Here in America, everyone must be treated with dignity and respect, and hate must have no safe harbor. Here in America, we need to get out of our silos, where we only listen to those with whom we agree, where misinformation is rampant, where foreign actors fan the flames of our division to shape the outcomes consistent with their interests, not ours. Let's remember, here in America, while unity is the most elusive of all goals right now, nothing is more important for us now than standing together. We can do this. You know, from the beginning, our founders understood the power of passion. So they created democracy that gave reason and balance a chance to prevail over brute force. That's the American we must be. An American democracy where arguments are made in good faith. An American democracy where the rule of law is respected. An American democracy where decency, dignity, fair play aren't just quaint notions, but living, breathing realities. We owe that to those who come before us, to those who gave their lives for this country. We owe that to ourselves. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. Look, let's never lose sight of who we are. Let's remember we are the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Okay, so that was the address. You know, I think it's exactly what we thought it would be as we headed into this. I think all of us recognized that this wasn't going to be anything with electoral implications or not or whatnot. Joe Biden has been very consistent in terms of his desire to, you know, look, from the very beginning, he ran his 2020 campaign on this desire to unite the country. So I think this is going to be no different here. Let's go. I think this is going to be no different here. With that said, again, if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them. But overall, look, I think the main message that I want to convey, and this is what I was speaking about in the pre-show here just before this, is that a lot of what we're seeing in this election is going to be a referendum on this very type of violence, where you have, you know, one side, and Biden alluded to this, but again, we have, you know, Donald Trump is somebody who's called for tribunals for Liz Cheney. He's reposted images of Joe Biden being tied up in the back of somebody's truck bed. We, of course, have right-wing militias who'd sought to assassinate and kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. You know, you have Trump himself, who couldn't even bring himself to tell the Proud Boys to stand down, instead offering them up, stand back and stand by, which is basically a call to arms. So let's be clear. If we don't want to see this violence, this type of violence moving forward, we're the only ones who are able to choose that. This election is going to be a referendum on exactly that. You know, another term for Joe Biden, for Democrats, is going to ensure that, you know, this brand of politics, where there's of politics of demagoguery, of calls to violence, will kind of be repudiated yet again. And Republicans, in theory, would have to find a different way. But if Trump wins in this next election, this is the guy who has advocated on Truth Social for Biden to be tied up. It is the guy who's advocated for Liz Cheney to face a military tribunal. This is somebody who's advocated for the death penalty for people who do things that don't comport with what he wants them to do. This is somebody who already incited an insurrection on January 6th that did lead to the death of his supporters. This is somebody who like on example after example after example, this is somebody who has wielded violence as a political tool. And so again, for the people who've come out within the Republican Party, the J.D. Vances and Mike Collins and Marjorie Taylor Greenes, who've kind of tried to blame the rhetoric, blame the assassination attempt on rhetoric by Democrats, in terms of Democrats like rightly calling Donald Trump a fascist, I think is such a misguided and dangerous reaction to all of this. Rightly calling Donald Trump a fascist is not only not a justification to commit violence, but the people who call him a fascist are people who don't want to see violence at all used in politics. So it's completely backwards. And I think they know that, but none of this is being done in bad faith. None of this is being done in good faith as far as these Republicans are concerned. Okay, with that said, you can throw questions in the chat. I will do my best to answer them. Okay, I'm getting multiple questions about the picture of Donald Trump raising his fist and saying, "Fight, fight, fight." Look, I think that picture feeds into the exact martyrdom that Donald Trump wants to have. I mean, his whole thing is that he's a victim at the hands of the deep state, of the evil Democrats, of the communists, Marxists, whatever it is. And this picture is going to be him just using it's just like one more tool for him to use to show that he's the victim at the hands of evil people. First of all, as far as the reporting is concerned, this seems to be a registered Republican and clearly somebody who's very sick, who fired those shots in the first place. So it is bizarre to pin the blame on the left when nobody on the left is advocating for violence. In fact, we're advocating for a system of government where fascism and violence don't exist. B, if the Democrats had their way, those kind of weapons wouldn't even be out in the public, and somebody who's 20 years old wouldn't even be able to get his hands on that kind of weapon. So there's just a multitude of reasons why it's just ridiculous. But look, we're gonna have to contend with images of Donald Trump fist pumping the air, bloodied, right in front of an American flag. But it's not any different than any of the other propaganda that Trump is spewing out to his audience, where he claims that he is the victim at the hands of the evil deep state Democrats. And so nothing changes other than there's just more enthusiasm on the right. And that's the issue, because there will be an enthusiasm gap, at least as of right now. Hopefully that changes. Hopefully that gap is closed. But right now, we have a Republican Party that is very intent on going out and voting for Donald Trump, because in no small part due to the events that happened this weekend. And we have a Democratic Party that's largely deflated as the result of Joe Biden's debate performance, for example. So there is a pretty massive asymmetry there that we're going to have to contend with. And so the onus is on us, the people who are watching right now, the people who are in this chat watching this video, for example, to continue talking to your circles of people, making sure that people have a plan to vote, making sure that, your friends, your family, your neighbors, your coworkers, whoever it is, that they have a plan to vote, and that they don't succumb to our biggest issue in this campaign, which is going to be choosing between the ballot box and the couch. Thank you, by the way, for people donating. I appreciate it. You don't have to do that. Actually, if people are looking to support my work, and I feel weird saying this right now, but for anybody looking to support my work, you don't need to donate, but I appreciate it. But the best way to support my work is I have a book coming out in 1 month from today, or 1 month from yesterday. It's called Shameless, and I'll put the link to pre-order it in the chat. That is the best way to support what I do. But please, you don't have to donate or anything like that. But if you're looking to support my work, I have a book coming out, and this way you actually get something in exchange for money. But again, I appreciate it. I just pinned it in the chat, and if anybody's looking to support me, that's the best way to do it. Okay. So this is a good point that I'm getting from someone in the chat right now. I know it's dark to think, but had Trump not made it through that alive, what would have been the effects? And that's the thing. I mean, if you think this is bad now, if you think the base is rabid now, if you think that the responses we're getting from people like Mike Collins and Marjorie Taylor Greene and J.D. Vance are bad now, just imagine what it would have wrought if Donald Trump was actually killed, as the result of what we saw yesterday of this shooter in Pennsylvania. That's why I'm glad that we didn't see that, because I don't know that the country would have been able to handle that. And again, it goes back to my earlier point that violence is not the answer in any of this. No one is advocating for this. At least nobody on the left is advocating for any violence as a political tool. And that is part of the reason, because it doesn't redound to anybody's benefit in any which way. I think that's just like an important point to bring up. And don't make it difficult for people on the left by saying like, oh, bummer that he missed, that's not gonna help anything. And, it doesn't help to like stoop to the level of people who we want to defeat. I think is what I'm trying to say. We don't have to become the people that we want to beat. Okay. How long do you think that we should withhold the ads? Shouldn't we now more than ever create side-by-side rhetoric comparisons showing the hateful violence of the GOP? This is not time to back down. I do tend to agree with that, because I don't think that this. Look, I think this is a very fair opportunity for people to say, look, Democrats do not advocate for violence. Democrats have not wielded violence as a political tool. Democrats don't want the guns that were used at Saturday's rally to be available to anyone who's under 21 years old. Democrats don't want those guns to be available to anyone in this country, period. At least a large portion of Democrats don't want that. And so, we are on the right side of this issue. And meanwhile, you've got Trump, to reiterate this list, this is somebody who's advocated for reposted stuff saying that he wants military tribunals for Liz Cheney. He posted a picture of Joe Biden tied up in the truck bed of somebody on the highway. This is, in moment after moment. This is, of course, January 6th, him promising to pay the legal bills of his supporters who beat up protesters at his rally. So, there have been so many different examples of Donald Trump using violence as a political tool, and that is not who the Democrats are. And I think that this is a good opportunity to create that side by side. Look, in terms of the actual campaigns, we're not going to see that right now. They're going to wait a couple of days, but I think it's incumbent on people in a way that's respectful and, again, not turning into the very people who we're seeking to defeat, to draw, in a clear, concise, not vicious manner, those side by sides, because again, that is, using political violence is something that redounds to their benefit. If this election turns into a referendum on like demagoguery, Trump will win, because that's the message he's trying to send. It's clear. It's in stark contrast to the message that we just saw by Joe Biden. So, I think it's a fair point, and I think, as long as we do it in a way that's that's appropriate and not something that we're going to regret down the line, not something that we would condemn if we saw somebody on the right do it, then I think it's a perfectly fair, perfectly fair thing to do. It's a perfectly fair point to point out. Let's see. Getting questions about whether or not certain people can defeat Trump. Look, I think Trump is beatable by anybody. At this point, we can engage in thought experiments. The question I got was whether Josh Shapiro could defeat Trump. And of course, which raises the obvious question whether, Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, Wes Moore, Kamala Harris can defeat Trump. But I think right now it's a little bit of a fool's errand because, I'm in the same boat as you. I don't know what's going to happen as we move forward, but it doesn't seem like Joe Biden has any intention of stepping back. I mean, we've seen polls that were really daunting for Democrats to see. I mean, one that I mentioned earlier in the pre-show is there was a poll that showed Tammy Baldwin up by 5 points and Joe Biden down against Donald Trump by 5 points. That's a 10-point swing. And the reason why that's so worrisome is these are the same respondents. So we have actual voters who said, yes, I'm going to vote for Tammy Baldwin. I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden. So it's easy to point to a poll where, Tammy Baldwin is, where Joe Biden is up by 1 point or 2 points, or Donald Trump is up by 1 point or 2 points or 5 points or whatever it is, and say like, okay, but that's just like a poll, and we don't have a direct comparison of what that means, in the broader scheme of things, and you can just discard any poll. Look, we all do it. That doesn't confirm our priors, right? But I think when we see a poll that shows Tammy Baldwin up 5 points and Joe Biden down 5 points, in the same poll, among the same respondents who are clearly going to cast their ballots for Tammy Baldwin, who want her to win, it shows that Joe Biden is dragging that side of the ticket down. So that is worrisome. But look, at this point, we've had a number of Democrats in Congress. I believe we've had a senator. I know we've had George Clooney and other big donors come out and express concern or call for Joe Biden to stand down. If he's not going to do it, then I think we're going to find that out in the coming days, and we just have to retool and make sure that we have a message moving forward that really, what I've found is the most effective, and what I'm thinking about as we look forward is like, it's all about the kind of country we want to live in moving forward, regardless of whether Joe Biden's at the top of the ticket or not. What kind of a country Donald Trump is going to usher in versus what kind of agenda Joe Biden is going to bring forward. And I think even with Joe Biden being the age he is right now, there's nothing I can point to in his presidency that's been impacted by his age. He is not a good candidate right now. But Joe Biden as a president, I can do the whole laundry list, but I know that people watching have heard it a million times. Him as a president has not been impacted by the age issue. So we'll find out in the coming days whether it's going to be Joe Biden once and for all as we head into the convention, and then we'll retool and make sure that our messaging reflects the fact that it's not about the person at the top of the ticket. It's the agenda that they're going to bring in and what kind of a country we want to live in moving forward. But again, we'll get an answer to that in short order. And yeah, look, I'm getting folks saying like Biden was up by 2 in the recent Marist poll. Absolutely, and I can basically look at that as being sacrosanct, but then I also might see a poll that shows him down by 2, and am I gonna disregard that in my mind? Like, am I gonna hold that just as sacrosanct in my mind as the one that showed him up? Am I only gonna look at polls that show him doing well? The last thing I want to do is fool myself into believing one thing or the other. And I don't know what polls are accurate. I don't think any of us know what polls are accurate. None of them may be. God, I hope the vast majority of them are not accurate right now. But, all we can do is work with the information that we have when we have it. I think the first thing is going to be able to get some clarity on where Joe Biden stands in terms of actually being the nominee. And when we get that answer, which is going to be in the coming days or weeks, then we'll be able to have, figure out what messaging we need moving forward. But we can always engage in these thought experiments that show how Donald Trump does against Kamala and Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro and Wes Moore and, whoever it is. But I think at this point, it's important to just kind of focus on the reality that's in front of us instead of just engaging in hypotheticals that may never even come to pass. But it's a good point. I mean, look, the polls are important to point to. I don't think we should cast them off. I do want it. What I don't think we should do is lie to ourselves about any of it just because something is uncomfortable or inconvenient. I think we should take everything. We can't just allow information to come in that is going to make us feel good. We have to look at everything holistically and just try to get an accurate portrayal of what the political environment we're in right now is. Do I think there's a benefit of doing a basic civics series? I actually do that with Jamie Raskin. For those who aren't subscribed to this channel, please subscribe. I have a series called Class with Jamie Raskin where we discuss constitutional fallacies and right-wing fever dreams, and he rebuts them, and he does like a 40-minute class. Like I have a business degree. I regret every day of my life not going to American University where Jamie Raskin was a college professor, and sitting in his class and just learning from someone like him. I regret that so much, but this is an opportunity to do exactly that, to just listen to what this guy has to say. So that's a quick plug for my channel here for those who aren't subscribed. Okay, I'll take one more question, and then I'm going to get to work on a more well thought out and clear response to what happened in Pennsylvania, because I haven't done a video on that yet, and so I think I owe that to everybody. And but I do need some time to kind of collect my thoughts in all of this, and it has been a rough time. And look, let's use this as the last thing that I'm going to say. I do know that it feels really dire right now and depressing. And if you're on the left, from the immunity ruling that we saw handed down by the Supreme Court, followed by a really dismal debate performance by Joe Biden, followed by, what on its face looks like a good moment for Donald Trump, which is not to say that like an assassination attempt is a good moment, but him coming out of this and he has an invigorated base, and he has that photo of him raising his fist in front of the American flag, and things do seem to fall his way over and over and over, almost exclusively at this point. And I know it's hard not to feel some degree of despair, not just at the state of politics in this country right now, but also at the way things seem to be breaking in Trump's favor 10 times out of 10, like pretty much at a rate of 100% right now. And that is just to not check out, to not give the very people who are trying to ruin all of this, trying to usher in an agenda that would strip rights away, freedoms away, democracy away, to not relent and basically say, you're trying to usher in the end of democracy, and so as a result, I'm going to do what will make that easiest for you. That can't be the response to all of this. We can't say, we cannot reward the people who seek to strip our democracy and our freedoms away by giving them exactly what we want. So if that means take a few days off, don't watch any videos, don't log on to Twitter, don't do anything that's going to upset you and give yourself a reset, then just do that. And this is coming from me, who's a content creator who relies on people tuning into my videos to be able to pay my mortgage, right? So, but do what you need to do. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I know how it can just drag the life out of us right now by just staring at this stuff all day. And yesterday I had a moment like, look, I should be covering this stuff, and I needed to not do anything because I'm human, and I also, get overwhelmed with feelings of despair amid all of this. And so take whatever time you need. And this is a bad moment right now, but collect yourself, take a beat, come back to this refreshed, and because we have a lot of work to do as we head toward November, and it's not going to be on the courts to save us. It's not going to be on prosecutors to save us. It's not going to be on lawyers to save us. We can't rely on the Biden campaign to save us, or any of these political campaigns, or the DSCC, or the DCCC, or the DNC, or whatever it is. It is going to be on all of us. Here's the example that I give, and if you've watched my videos, you've heard me say this, but I think it's a point worth repeating, and I'll end here. The 2020 election and the 2016 election, I believe it was both of them in Wisconsin, were decided by 2 votes per precinct. That was the difference in 2016 between, in 2016 and in 2020. In 2020 was the difference between a Biden win and a Trump win. And so 2 votes per precinct means that everybody watching has enough agency that if all of us spoke to two people who weren't voting, who were going to vote a different way, who were deciding between the couch and the ballot box, that you can get people to turn out that can actually swing an election. And these things are going to be close. I mean, these elections are decided by probably 40,000 people in 4 or 5 states. A lot of people here have the opportunity to talk to two people. And if the difference in 2020 was 2 votes per precinct, and the difference in 2024 could also be 2 votes per precinct, then you have the agency here to make sure that this election goes toward Biden and not toward Trump. So do not check out. Don't throw your hands up. Make sure that you give yourself whatever time you need to decompress and to get back in it, ready to actually do the work, because it's going to be a lot of work between, now and November. But I would also say a lot can change. It is July 14th right now. A lot can change between July and August and September and October. Imagine where you were in December of 2019 versus March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. A world of difference. Everything can change in a matter of moments. And we found that out just this past weekend. So don't despair. Recognize that, we do have agency in a lot of this. And you'll have people like me, people, in the rest of this progressive media ecosystem, and your own, circles of people in real life to lean on here. But take whatever time you need, and know that you don't have to be steeped in all of the bullshit of politics right now if you don't want to, or if it's making you feel, depressed or despairing, that you can come back to it, and everybody will be able to welcome you back, and we'll move forward to fight, we'll move forward to fight and to do the work, and whatever we need to do to win moving forward. So that's it. Thank you for watching. Thanks for checking out Biden's Oval Office address. I will start working on a more cogent video explaining my thoughts on everything that happened. But in the meantime, thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.